Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Village School by Miss Reed. There's just been a thunderstorm, and the children are being sent home as best they may, as dry as they may. Mr. Annett, with a solicitude for his future wife that was quite pretty to see, had deserted his school children promptly at 4 and dashed over in his car to collect Miss Gray. I prevailed upon them to share my tea, and together we sat gossiping and eating homemade gingerbread in the schoolhouse. "As long as schools are dependent on local rates," said Mr. Annett decidedly, dusting far too many crumbs for my peace of mind from his lap to the carpet, "there are bound to be serious disparities in buildings and equipment. My 3 little nieces started their schooling in Middlesex. Their first school was a model one, individual towels, combs, beds, and so on. There was a paddling pool, 2 chutes, stacks of first-class toys, mounds of paper, chalks, and everything else a teacher or child could wish for. Now they've moved into this area, and their local village school is not only as antiquated in design and as primitive in its sanitation and water supply as this one, but is also looked upon, as far as I can see, by the families with whom they play as only good enough for other people's children." "Don't I know?" I agreed feelingly. "My sister is looked upon as an oddity because her daughters are going to the village school," he continued. "But, as she and her husband point out, they have faith in our state education and believe they're doing a wise thing. They live within a stone's throw of the school, and the girls are taught in small classes by teachers who are all qualified and certified, and any complaints made by their parents as ratepayers about conditions have every chance of being considered and put right." "It's very difficult to argue about," I answered, "for in the end it boils down to the liberty of the individual. If parents prefer to pay for schooling, well, why shouldn't they? I, too, deplore this village school is good enough for them attitude, but short of state education for all with no choice at all, what can be done?" "I don't quite know," said Mr. Annett thoughtfully, accepting his 4th cup of tea in a preoccupied way. "But there are 1 or 2 things that will have to come before very long. The discrepancies between different areas will have to be overcome to begin with. Just as the teachers' salaries have been made equal in different areas, so should the school conditions be evened up. And if only more intelligent parents would make use of their local school and take an interest in it, instead of complaining about the rates they have to pay, plus school fees that they need not, it might be a step in the right direction." "Owners of private schools won't think so," I pointed out as he rose to help Miss Gray with her coat. We made our way to the car. The storm had spent itself, and the sides of the lane were running with little rivers, bearing twigs, leaves, and other flotsam on their swirling surfaces. The air was soft and fresh, and a blackbird was singing its heart out in the cherry tree. "We're very lucky," I observed, breathing in the damp, earthy smell. But Mr. Annett was gazing at Miss Gray. It was some time before he spoke. "Very, very lucky," he echoed soberly. Chapter 22. The Outing. The first Saturday in July is always kept free in Fairacre for the combined Sunday school and choir outing. "At one time," said the vicar, "the schools here closed for a fortnight at the end of June for a fruit-picking holiday, and as they were paid at the end of that time, the outing was held then. And now, somehow, we just stick to the first Saturday in July. It seems to suit us all." He beamed happily round the coach, which was filled with 33 of his parishioners of all sizes and shapes, each one dressed in his best. Behind us chugged another coach, equally full, for mothers were encouraged to accompany their children on this expedition. For really, as the vicar remarked, it would be far too great a responsibility for my wife and 2 Sunday school teachers to undertake, and it does give some of these poor housebound women a breath of fresh air. Mrs. Pratt, as organist, was there with her 2 children, and behind her sat Mr. Annett as choirmaster and Miss Gray. They were both making heroic efforts to be civil and attentive to their fellow travelers, for they were at that stage of mutual infatuation where the mere presence of other people is a burden. I wondered how quickly they would abandon us when we reached the seashore. They would certainly need a breathing space on their own for an hour or 2, after behaving with such admirable self-control under the gaze of 31 pairs of eyes. Miss Clare sat beside me. There had been a few seats to spare, and she had agreed to come just to smell the sea and collect a fresh seaweed ribbon to hang on the back porch so that she could tell the weather. Years ago, she said, we used to have our outing in a brake with 4 horses to pull it. Of course, we never went far, to the sea or any distance like that, but we had wonderful times. For several years, we went to Sir Edmund Hurley's park beyond Springbourne, and we all loved that journey because we had to splash through the ford at the bottom of the steep hill there. It was before they altered the road and built the new bridge. Was that Sir Edmund who gave Fairacre School its piano? I asked, a vision of that fretwork-fronted jangler rushing at me from 40 miles behind. That's the one, cried Miss Clare, delighted at my knowledge. He was a great friend of the vicar's at that time, the late vicar, Canon Emsley, such a dear and so musical. He was shocked to find the school without an instrument, and mentioned it to Sir Edmund one day when he was visiting at Hurley Hall. The upshot was that the present piano was sent over from the Hall. Most generous, but then all the Hurleys have been renowned for their generosity. My grandfather, boomed Mrs. Pringle, swiveling round on the seat in front, was the one as made the choir stalls that come in for some uncalled-for criticism by them as is ignorant of such things. My grandfather did a tidy bit of carpentering for Sir Edmund. She cast a triumphant look at Mr. Annett from under the brim of her brown straw hat, as one who says, and if Sir Edmund was satisfied with my grandfather's handiwork, then who are you to point the finger of scorn at his choir stalls? But Mr. Annett was too busy adjusting the window so that no harmful gale should blow upon his life's love, and the shaft went by him and left him unscathed. And what's more, continued Mrs. Pringle, penetrating bellow, Sir Edmund asked his advice for some jobs actually in the house. She nodded her head belligerently, the bunch of cherries on her hat brim just a split second behind in time. This bunch of cherries is an old and valued friend, nodding from straw in the summer and felt in the winter, and now so far gone in years as to show here and there a little split through which the white stuffing oozes gently like some exotic mildew. In the house? Echoed Miss Clare. Where did your grandfather do the carpentering there? Kitchen cupboards, said Mrs. Pringle shortly, and bounced round again to face front, the cherries quivering, but whether with indignation or family pride, no one could say. Beresford, as everyone knows, is a genteel watering place with wonderful firm, broad sands which would cause a less refined borough to advertise itself as a paradise for kiddies. The children were ready to rush to the sea's edge the minute that the coaches shuddered to a standstill, but were restrained by the vicar, who, using his bell-like pulpit voice, made an announcement. We shall disperse, dear people, until 4:30, when we shall meet at our old friend Bunce's on the esplanade. I gather that an excellent tea is to be prepared for us there, with cold ham and other meats, salad, cakes, ices, and so on. We shall leave here at 5:30 sharp. He looked severely at his flock, knowing that punctuality is not one of our Fairacre virtues. At 5:30, he repeated, and even so we shall not be home, I fear, until nearly 9, which is rather late for our very young members. Never mind, Vicar, called a cheerful mother at the rear of the coach. It's only Sunday tomorrow, nothing to get up for. This remark must have been instantly regretted, so scandalized was the vicar's expression on hearing it, for, as well as its derogatory tone about the importance of the Sabbath, he would be celebrating Holy Communion at 8 a.m., Matins at 11 a.m., children's service at 3 p.m., and evensong at 6:30 p.m. 4:30 at Bunce's, then, he repeated in a somewhat shaken voice, and 5:30 here. He stood aside, and with whoops of joy and rattlings of buckets, the youth of Fairacre swept onto the beach with a reckless disregard for curb drill that made their teachers' blood, if not their parents', run cold. Miss Clare had decided to take a turn about the shops before going down to the sea, and asked me if I would like to accompany her. But not, of course, if you would prefer to be elsewhere. It's only that I'm looking out for a blue cardigan, something between a royal and a navy, to wear with my gray worsted skirt in the winter. I said that there was nothing I should like better than a turn round the shops. It would be so useful, too, for school, went on Miss Clare happily, her eyes sparkling at this prospect, just in case, I am needed for the time Miss Gray leaves until Christmas. The vicar has been so very kind about it all, and I feel so much better for my rest that I hope I can come back, even if it is only for a few weeks. It was nice to see Miss Clare so forward-looking again, and I hoped for her sake that the vacancy at Fairacre School would not be filled before the end of next term. We had a successful shopping expedition. Most suitable, madam, the girl had gushed, and if madam ever indulged in a blue rinse, the effect would be quite electrifying. Digesting this piece of intelligence, we made our way to the beach, where, scattered among the other families, the Fairacre children could be seen digging, splashing, and eating with the greatest enjoyment. The tide was crawling slowly in over the warm sand, and Ernest was busy digging a channel to meet it. His spade was of sharp metal and cleaved the firm sand with a satisfying crunch. I thought regretfully of my own childhood's spade, a solid wooden affair much despised by me, but nothing would persuade my parents that I would not chop off my own toes and be a cripple for life if I were given a metal one. And so I had to battle on with my inadequate tool, while more fortunate children sliced away beside me with half the effort and, as far as my jaundiced eye could see, a full complement of toes. Ernest paused for a minute in his work. "Wish we could stay here longer," he said. "A day's not long, is it?" We settled ourselves near him and agreed it wasn't very long. "You'd better make up your mind to be a sailor," I said, nodding to a boat drawn up at the edge of the beach. People were climbing in, ready for a trip round the harbor. "Oh, I wouldn't like that," responded Ernest emphatically. "I don't reckon the sea's safe, for one thing. I mean, you might easy get drownded, mightn't you?" "A lot of people don't," I assured him, but his brow remained perplexed, working out the countryman's suspicions of a new environment. "There don't seem enough grass and trees somehow, nor animals. Why, I didn't see any cows or sheep the last bit of the journey. No, I'd sooner live at Fairacre, I reckons, but I'd like to have a good long holiday here." Having come to terms with himself, he began digging again with renewed effort, and I looked about to see how the other children fared. The sky was blue, but with a fair amount of cloud, which kept the temperature down. Despite this, most of the children seemed content to be in bathing costumes, but it was interesting to see with what respect and awe they treated the sea. Not one of them, it appeared, could swim. Not surprising, perhaps, when one considered that Fairacre was a downland village, and the nearest swimming water was at Caxley, 6 miles distant. I wished, not for the first time, that I could see my way clear to taking my older children into the Caxley swimming baths once a week. But the poor bus service, combined with the difficulties of rearranging the timetable to fit in this activity, made it impossible at the moment. Paddlers there were in plenty, but not one of the Fairacre children went more than a yard or two from the beach edge into the surf, and while they stood with the swirling water round their ankles, they kept a weather eye cocked on dry land, ready to make a dash for safety if this strange, unfamiliar element should play any tricks with them. At digging, they came into their own. Armchairs, sandworks, channels, bridges, and castles of incredible magnitude were constructed with patience and industry. The Fairacre children could handle tools and had the plodding, unhurried methods of the countrymen that produce amazing results. Here was the perfect medium for their inborn skill. The golden sand was turned, raked, piled, patted, and ornamented with shells and seaweed, until I seriously thought of importing a few loads into the playground at home to see what wonders they could perform there. One or two went with their parents for a trip in the boat, but they sat, I noticed, very close to the maternal skirts and looked at the green water rushing past them with respectful eyes. The day passed cheerfully and without incident. Tea at Bunce's was the usual happy family affair held in an upstairs room with magnificent views of the harbor. Our Mr. Edward Bunce, as the waiter told us, was in personal attendance on our needs, an elegant figure in chalk-striped flannel and bow tie. Soft of voice and smooth of manner, he swooped around us with the teapot, the living emblem of the personal service which has made Bunce's the great tea shop that it is. At 5:30 we were back in our coaches with seaweed, shells, and 2 or 3 unhappy crabs awash in buckets in an inch or two of seawater. The vicar, quite pink with the sea air, was holding his gold half-hunter and counting heads earnestly. Mr. Annett and Miss Gray mounted the steps in a dazed way and resumed their seat amid sympathetic smiles. Then only one seat remained empty. "Mrs. Pratt, Vicar," called someone. "Mrs. Pratt and her 2 little uns." "I think I see one of them coming across from the chemist's shop," answered the vicar. A fat little girl in a pink frock stumped across to the coach, panted heavily up the steps and to her place, and sat swinging her legs cheerfully. We continued to wait. The driver flipped back his little glass window and said, "That the lot?" "No, no," answered Mr. Partridge, rather flustered. "One more and a little boy to come. Peggy, my dear," he said to the elder Pratt child, "is your mummy still in the chemist's?" "Yes," said the child, smiling smugly. "Robin's got something in his eye." She sounded both proud and pleased. The vicar looked perturbed and sought his wife's support anxiously. She rose, bustling from her seat, leaving her gloves and bag neatly behind her. "I'll just run across to her," said the good lady, and trotted across to the open door of the chemist's shop. Dimly, in the murk of the interior, we could see figures grouped round a chair, on which presumably sat the patient. There were head shakings and gesticulations, and at length Mrs. Partridge came hurrying back with the news. "The chemist seems to think that the child should see a doctor. He suggested we take him to the outpatients department at the hospital. It's quite near here, evidently." There was what reporters call a sensation at this dramatic announcement. Some were all for getting out of the coach, rushing across to fetch Robin and Mrs. Pratt away from all these foreigners, and taking them straight home to their dear familiar Dr. Martin. Others suggested that the chemist was a scaremonger, and that the bit of old whatever it is will soon slip out. You know what eyes is, hell one minute and all Sir Garnet the next. But all factions were united in the greatest sympathy for the unfortunate family. "The child is in great pain," went on Mrs. Partridge, looking quite distracted. "Cigarette ash, evidently, and it seems to have burnt the eye. I really feel that he should go to the hospital." "In that case, my dear," said the vicar, making himself heard with difficulty above the burst of lamentation that greeted this further disclosure, "you and I had better stay with Mrs. Pratt and see this thing through while the rest of the party go back to Fairacre." "But tomorrow is Sunday," pointed out his wife. "Upon my word," said the vicar, turning quite pink with embarrassment, "it had slipped my mind." "Shall I stop?" I volunteered. At the same time, a voice said, "What about little Peggy here? Had she better come with us or stay with her mum?" Bedlam broke out, as again everyone offered advice, condolence, or reminiscences of past experiences of a similar nature. The driver, who had had his head stuck through his little window and had been following affairs with grave attention, now said heavily, "I hates to hurry you, sir, but I'm due back at 9 to collect a party of folks after a dance in Caxley, and we're running it a bit fine, if you'll pardon me mentioning it." The vicar said that of course, he quite understood, and then outlined his plan. "If you will stop with Mrs. Pratt and Robin," he said to his wife, "I'm sure our good friend Mr. Bunce will be able to find you a night's lodging. I will hurry there myself if the driver thinks we can spare 10 minutes. He looked inquiringly at the driver and received a reassuring nod. He produced his wallet, and there was a flutter of notes between him and Mrs. Partridge. "And then hire a taxi, my dear, to bring you all back tomorrow." He looked suddenly stricken. "I shall have to remember to set the alarm clock for early service, of course. I must tie a knot in my handkerchief to remind me." This masterly arrangement was applauded by all, and we were sitting back congratulating ourselves on our vicar's acumen when a little voice said, "And what about me?" We all turned to look at Peggy, who sat wide-eyed and rather cross, waiting to hear her fate. There was an awkward pause. "There's no one at home," said Mrs. Pringle. "That I do know. Mr. Pratt's off doing his annual trainin' with the terriers." "Would you sleep in my house?" I asked her. "I've got a nice teddy bear in the spare room." This inducement seemed to be successful, for she agreed at once. Mrs. Partridge hurried back to tell Mrs. Pratt what had been planned, while the vicar sped at an amazing pace back to Mr. Bunce's tea shop to see if he knew where beds might be engaged for the night. The coach buzzed with conversation as we waited for the vicar's return. "Real wonderful the vicar's been, I reckons. Got a good headpiece on him, and kind with it, proper good-hearted. I feel sorry for that little Robin. Must be painful, that poor little toad." Peggy elected to sit by me, and Miss Clare obligingly took herself and her parcel containing the new winter cardigan to Peggy's vacated seat. In a few minutes, a sad little group emerged from the chemist's shop. Robin had a large pad of cotton wool over one eye, securely clamped down with an eye shade. Mrs. Pratt was drying her tears as bravely as she could, while Mrs. Partridge held Robin by one hand and Mrs. Pratt's shopping bag in the other. They approached the coach and made their farewells. "You be a good girl now, Peg," adjured her tearful mother, "and do as Miss Reed tells you, and if you'd be so kind as to keep a nightlight burnin', miss, I'd be real grateful. She gets a bit fussed up like if she wakes up in the dark, high-strung, you know." I assured her that Peggy should have all she wanted, and amid sympathetic cries and encouragement, the three made their farewells and departed in the direction of Bunce's. In record time, the vicar reappeared. Mr. Bunce's own sister had obliged with most suitable accommodation, and had offered to accompany the Fairacre party to the hospital in the kindest manner, said the vicar. The driver set off at once, and the great coach made short work of the miles between Beresford and Fairacre. 9 o'clock was striking from St. Patrick's Church as we clambered out, and within half an hour Peggy Pratt was sitting up in the spare bed drinking hot milk and crunching ginger nuts. A candle was alight on the chest of drawers, its flame shrinking and stretching in the draught from the open door. "I likes this nightie," said the child, looking admiringly at a silk vest of mine that was doing duty as nightgown for my small guest. There had been no tears and no pining for the distant mother and little brother left behind at Beresford. I hoped that she would fall asleep quickly before she had time to feel homesick. "I shall leave the door open," I told her, tucking in the moth-eaten teddy beside her, "in case you want me. And in the morning we'll have some boiled eggs for breakfast that Miss Clare's chicken laid yesterday." I took her mug and plate and went to the door. She wriggled down among the pillows, smiled enchantingly, sighed, and closed her eyes. She was asleep, I think, before I had reached the foot of the stairs. And we shall continue our way through summer next time.